Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us to the Conscious Entrepreneur panel discussion. I am joined here by three very distinguished guests, Dan Radomski, Maya Zuckerman, and Jim Doty. I will hand it off to my colleagues here for quick intros, and we'll jump into our panel discussion. Dan, how about you kick us off?
Joselle, thanks for having me. Yeah, Dan Radomski is an executive director for Centropolis Accelerator, which is located in Michigan. And we run a C3 accelerator with a $1.65 million seed fund to help commercialize clean tech, climate tech, and circular economy-based technologies. And specifically with a focus on hardware, advanced materials, and look forward to talking with the panelists on this important subject. Thanks.
Thank you, Dan. Maya?
Thank you, Joselle. I'm Maya Zuckerman. My work is in consulting, clean tech, and I'm actually pursuing my MBA in circular economy and a fellow of the Ellen MacArthur Foundation is also in circular economy. And I'm really excited to be here today and deep dive into a subject that's really important as we imagine new ways of doing business in the world.
Thank you, Maya. Jim?
It's wonderful to be with you today. And my background is that I'm a neurosurgeon, neuroscientist professor at Stanford, but probably more germane to our conversation is I founded a center that examines the value proposition, if you will, of empathy, compassion, altruism, as well as mindfulness, which, as we know, these topics are now at the top of everyone's mind in this complex world, and how we can contribute in a positive way to make our world a better place. So thank you.
Excellent. Thank you to you all. So I'll get us started on this very important topic around conscious entrepreneurship. So first question to the panel, what does conscious entrepreneurship mean to you? And why is it important?
Great. I'm glad to kick it off, Joselle, with my thoughts. And we run a accelerator focused on physical products, right? Hardware. So for us, obviously, we look at the design of a product, right? And the material selection and really thinking about end of life. So use of natural materials and recyclable materials and biodegradable materials, and looking at far up front in the product design phase is an important way of being a conscious entrepreneur, as well as the energy consumption and the impact that you're having on the environment from your operations. You know, we've heard a lot about all the cryptocurrency companies and the energy draw from those operations as an example. But I think it's deeper than that. Obviously, we see more and more public benefit corporations these days, and for good reason, because there's a focus well beyond just sustainability of the products that they're selling or servicing, but really being mindful of bringing in ideas by a designated focus on workforce and diversity and inclusion and equity in their talent base, and giving employees the opportunities and challenge and ability to be happiness, and really thinking through mental health and wellness issues, and obviously the contributions that companies as they grow, also being mindful of their community engagement and how they support their supply chain and the community in which they operate. So that's how I view conscious entrepreneurship.
I would second everything Dan has just said, and add to it is that in the time and place we're at in our civilization, and where our climate crisis is, all kinds of other social problems that we have, actually bringing in the focus of intentionality as humans doing the work, and how we do work together, and how do we actually collaborate, and how do we create better solutions for the needs on the planet. Part of it is being mindful of first yourself, your own self-regulation as a leader, your own behavior, your own way and of being, and mindset that you bring to your work, and also what you're working on. Of course, understanding the full supply chain and how the impacts the people that you work with, the planet, lived and natural environments. So all of that brings into the equation leaders and entrepreneurs that need to bring more mindfulness and intentionality into how they do business. So for me, that is what the conscious entrepreneur is. It's really this request and demand of where we are, as I said in the beginning, to actually bring in more thoughtfulness into the way we do business, the way we do work in the world.
Wonderful. And I certainly concur with all of that. As has been said multiple times, this concept of mindfulness and intentionality are very important. If we look at the history of, if you will, industrialization, the primary motivation actually was profit. And unfortunately, that came at the cost of people and oftentimes the environment. And I believe that when we now look at our world, there are a couple issues. First of all, there is no question, at least in a large number of people's mind, that how we manufacture, how we do business in this world, in the context of its impact on the environment, and oftentimes the least able to afford a group of people in terms of the impact, has got to change. Because if it does not, we will continue to destroy our planet, and there won't be a planet. And this will come at extraordinary cost. So now the conscious entrepreneur understands these realities. Instead of having a leader who is focused on the bottom line, which is maximization of profit, we have individuals who are passionate not only about their desire to create a wonderful project or product, but also recognize this concept, as Dan was mentioning, about all the steps it takes in terms of pre-planning to ensure not only do you have a product that, of course, works, but it's also been very specifically designed in the context of decreasing the amount of energy necessary to manufacture it, having the ability, unlike what has been practiced for so long, where we have a throwaway economy, but in fact, where we have an economy in which recycling, reuse is at the forefront. And what happens when you do these things, it has a very profound effect. First of all, a conscious entrepreneur understands that people are not widgets. They're not replaceable. People are unique. People offer unique abilities and contributions. And when you pay a person a living wage, not a minimum wage, when you think about, as you're running your company, what is it that is necessary to allow human thriving? Of course, when you do that, that has a dramatic effect. It has a dramatic effect, of course, on individuals' engagement. It has a dramatic effect on healthcare, even, because so many problems at many corporations have to do with stress and anxiety. And then the third thing, it has a huge impact on human resource costs. So when you're thoughtful and you recognize that the employees offer much to a company, but you have to develop your company not via a fear mode of trying to increase productivity, but frankly, one that is love, that what you do is center around how could you be kind, how can you be compassionate to those who work with you. And that's a very powerful statement and has been overlooked for so long, but now there are innumerable studies that demonstrate the value proposition of this. And then, of course, creating a project that, or a product that is needed, that doesn't pollute the environment, and that people want to use it because, and frankly, people will choose a company that is more mindful, more compassionate, that functions on this concept of intentionality much more than just buying a product. And while on some level it may cost more, I would argue that the fact that it would resonate with so many people is worth the cost. And in fact, you would make more profit.
Really great way to kind of understand how the different definitions and importance of things like mindfulness and intentionality in new ways in business. I want to pick up on a term I've heard you all say, which is the idea of circular economy. I wonder, Maya, if you can unpack this for us a little bit more, and why does it matter?
Yeah, it matters a lot. And before I even dive in, and I'm going to give two definitions, one of the circular economy, and then really grow out of it into the donut economics, which is another term, is the importance of these times where we have to actually embrace the complexity of the world we're living in. We live in a very complex world, and it's okay, which means also our solutions are not non-linear. and they need to actually be more complex, and we need to start moving towards closing all of these loops. So a circular economy, and this is more of the Ellen MacArthur Foundation terminology, is an economy that is restorative and regenerative by design. The idea is that by design, we actually start closing the loops, we design out waste and pollution, we keep materials and products in use longer, and we also regenerate the natural systems. So the idea that we don't waste, we actually look at waste as a resource that we can actually reuse many, many times. Example of a t-shirt, how many times can we actually resell the t-shirts? We make it once, reuse it multiple times in the supply chain, and at the end of its life, we can actually transition it into building material. But right now, one of the biggest polluters in the world where there's so much excess resource is actually textile industry. So, how do we actually close those loops? And the reason why I bring in the donut economics is because circular economy is very kind of part of the donut economics. This is the kind of economics we need to strive towards, more regenerative by design, as I said. But the donut actually is a compass for human prosperity in the 21st century. It's based on a book by Kate Raworth, both UK, these are both UK foundations, and looks at the social foundation and the ecological ceiling. Those are the two different donuts within the donut economics. The idea of the social foundation is to ensure that no human is left short on life's essential, and no actually natural environment is left on life's essential. And the other side is the ecological ceiling. This ensures that humanity does not collectively overshoot the planetary boundaries. This is based on years and years and years of research. Planetary boundaries came out in the 70s. The Club of Rome was part of also continuously studying the planetary boundaries and how do we actually live within these boundaries. And the idea is that if we shift those mindset away from continuous growth and growth for all, growth for growth's sake, we actually start living within the planetary boundaries, and we actually have more of a thriving community and a healthier and flourishing both environment and human environments.
Thank you for sharing that. So the idea, as you were speaking, I was thinking, that both donut and circular seem very continuous. So when do companies adopt these types of principles? Is there a life cycle, or when is the right time?
In the beginning.
What does that beginning look like?
In the design process. So in the design process of the product is where this is really recommended, because at the end of it, that's the harder thing. Yes, we still need to deal with the plastics in the ocean and the excess materials that we have and upcycling, and all that's great and is needed and is important. But moving forward, the designing out the waste, designing into circularity needs to start in the beginning. So that means, what type of materials, thinking through the life cycle of the product you're using. Also think about it, this is a huge economic positive model. You build once, you use 20 times, or you sell 20 times, or let's say three, but still you're building once, you sell 3 times. That could be really great and a really useful model. You're actually wasting less and you're being more efficient with the materials.
And if I can add to that, Maya, since we deal with helping hundreds of companies commercialize, and we help them with the actual product development portion of their physical products, we do challenge the entrepreneurs very early on in their engineering team to really look at the selection of materials, as well as how components are joined together. Because that's another issue, is if you're using dissimilar materials and they're joined together through rivets or welding, it's harder to recycle those products, right? So can we look at snap fits and other things that will also help you with design for serviceability as much as it will help you with, designing for end-of-life recyclability. And really just challenging the way they think about their choice of materials for end of life overall, and seeing what they can design in their products that could be truly recyclable materials that could come back as raw materials into their future products produced. So, we have to really separate, the understanding of upcycling versus recycling versus use of biodegradable materials or sustainable materials. And we try to address all with our clients that are developing products. But to use Maya's example of textiles, right? If you're developing textiles and it's polyester-based synthetic fibers that you're using, you can upcycle those into insulation and composite decks, use it for another product entirely. There's technologies that can recycle that polyester-based fiber back into woven fiber that you can use in apparel production for your own goods. Or you can look at using organic polymers mixed in with virgin materials to make a biodegradable apparel product, right? So these are all things that challenging up front in the design to be thinking through and understanding what partners you can even work with that could maybe do the upcycling of your products at end of life are things that I think a conscious entrepreneur should be looking at.
Just to comment, what we've seen is this better understanding, if you will, of our environment and, as has been mentioned, the potential of these practices that obviously have significantly contributed to deterioration of the planet. And what we've seen, I believe, is the necessity for a change in mindset. And it's interesting because when you first start talking to individuals in the leadership positions, they'll tell you every reason why they can't do it. It costs too much. It takes too much time. We're not really made for doing this. And the other is that, well, we're keeping people employed because we keep pumping this stuff out. But the reality is, if you really think about it, when you have people who are trained in these types of ideas about conscious leadership, conscious entrepreneurship, it starts creating an environment where now you, in fact, look outside of the traditional box of how things are done. And you understand also that with this aspect of recycling and all the opportunities that it brings, this actually is another source of profitability and employment on a much larger scale. So you're not losing anything by actually doing these types of practices. In fact, I would suggest not only are you making the planet a better place, but you're improving people's lives, the employers as well as the general world, because frankly, we have been brainwashed into believing that we have to have the latest, greatest thing. And this has created this whole issue of this massive production of things that are made to wear out. Imagine the United States consumes 1/4 of the resources, yet we're only 350 million people out of 7.9 billion people. And so there does have to be this shift in mindset to not necessarily have the latest thing, not necessarily go out and spend money, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I think the adoption of these concepts ultimately will not only make businesses thrive, but they'll make the world a better place.
If I could comment on that, I think the point Jim made was pretty important, is that we shouldn't look at design for sustainability and circular economy as a penalty or something you have to do. It really needs to be looked at as an opportunity, as a way to give yourself a competitive advantage. In fact, we've had a few clients that even pivoted. One of the companies we were working with that was using natural fibers like bamboo to convert into injection molding compounds to make more natural fibers as replacements to plastic parts. And they found that by focusing on waste fibers, they could actually have a more profitable business and create a more profitable compound into the market that was at par with virgin plastic materials. We've seen companies recycle technologies like leathers into leather goods and be able to command a premium and a good business for premium products, for instance, right? So I think it's really important that we understand that things are shifting here, right, in a rather significant way. Not only do businesses have more demands on them to utilize their waste streams, they're starting to demand that the suppliers they work with and the people they purchase from have sustainable practices. Just as they had protocols for minority suppliers, and you're starting to see that a need for a certification for a good seal of approval for sustainable ventures, which ultimately may find its way into large companies as a supplier requirement.
And I think just to comment on that, as we know, when companies focus, if you will, on this idea of looking outward and being helpful, not only is it ultimately more profitable, but many purchasers will pick out that entity that receives this certification and actively choose it. And sometimes even if it is more expensive, because they understand that in some cases it may result in a product being a little bit more expensive, but then when you put into the equation of reusability or recycling, that can be extraordinarily appealing. So as Dan noted, there is no downside to this. It's just you have to change your mindset from the traditional view of how business is done in regard to the manufacture of products to this new view of recyclability, reusability, and the value proposition of that.
I want to pick up on a couple of points that you all brought up around employees, suppliers, and even thinking how companies might influence suppliers, and the ideas around certification, which leads kind of in the thinking of this ecosystem within this economy. And as kind of the trends around businesses becoming much more global, much more highly connected, and especially in this time of disruption from COVID, perhaps even more connected than expected. How do conscious entrepreneurs influence this ecosystem to get us to, better, faster, and more impactful work?
One of the things that I've been tracing it, and actually had a wonderful conversation about it today with another group of people and they were looking at incubators and accelerators for different startups, is that we've been doing a lot of competition, and the challenges of the planet will need a lot of cooperation, and the competition needs to be, how do we get to zero emissions? I mean, that's the prize we're looking at, and it doesn't matter who wins it because we all get to win. So it's a win for all scenario. Because one of the issues with just a lot of siloed startups is that if you actually don't look at a system and how you work within a system in a healthy way, and we talked in one of our conversations about private-public partnerships and how do you actually interact with that. If I just, as a clean tech startup, just create a solution for solar, but actually don't interact with other technologies out there, I'm siloing in the solution that needs to be much more networked. Also, this is the world we live in. We all are highly networked. Everything's connecting to everything. Nobody's working in a silo anymore. So even that thinking needs to come from a different perspective of, not only am I helping create just the better solar panel, I'm just giving it as an example, or what does actually market need? What is the bigger gaps that I'm trying to connect between the PV creators and other solutions? And I'm actually starting to see that. I talked to a solar company that they don't do solar, they actually help with create efficiency for solar panels. So, I mean, the thought about it is a little bit different. We're no longer only looking at creating the new verticals. We're looking at how do we actually connect the connected tissues. So I think that is the way I would suggest for entrepreneurs to think more networked, more between the different connected tissues, of solving those problems of connectedness, because also that supports better circular economies, where we actually are closing the loops between the supply chain. And that's where a lot of the information is still lacking. That's where a lot of the gaps are. Everybody's doing great things in their field, but where it starts breaking down, and we saw it with COVID, is if one piece of the chain breaks down, the whole chain breaks. So how to create more resilience, how to create more distributed solutions that actually can be more resilient when big things, big crises like COVID, which will, it's a precursor to the bigger crises of the climate crisis. And what happens to actually, when that happens, how do we actually build for more resilient networks? And I think that is a huge opportunity and possibility for entrepreneurs, especially ones that are looking and thinking differently about the whole ecosystem.
Yeah, I'd like to pick up on your point, and maybe Dan, you can pick up on this. Maya, you talked about a healthy system relative to ecosystems. And I'm wondering, Dan, what does a healthy system look like?
A healthy ecosystem is when entire industries get their arms around what is needed to do to create a more sustainable, product, right? And really not only consider end of life, but circular economy options for the industry. So Maya pointed out the textile industry. There's been a big focus by the major apparel manufacturers, even furniture manufacturers that have textiles in their products, to really revisit what are sustainability measures for manufacturers and recycling and upcycling options and end of life use requirements. You're seeing this happening in the chemical industry, consumer products industry, and then there's public-private partnerships coming together, as you mentioned, Giselle, specifically trying to tackle major challenges of finding replacements for things like single-use plastics, Mylar bags, things that are very hard to recycle. As an entrepreneur, you should be aware of these trends and the standards that are being put in place, because they also will uncover opportunities for new technologies and new business models that ultimately can be capitalized on. Example of that too is, there's even public-private partnerships like Remade, right? A manufacturing institute where everybody's coming together and focusing on challenges to tackle very specific waste streams, e-waste, battery waste streams, single-use plastics, as I mentioned.
So I'll move to close this here on our closing question. What's the value proposition for being a conscious entrepreneur? Jim, would you like to kick us off on that?
Sure. And I think all of us have alluded to that to some effect. And first of all, when you have designed the company from the start to address many of these issues, whether it's how to allow your employees to thrive, how to create a business that addresses the issues of sustainability and developing a circular economy, what I believe will in fact happen is that this will not be a discussion about how much it costs to do so, but actually how profitable you can become compared to your competitors. Because in the public's mind right now is this idea of sustainability, climate change, how it's having a negative impact. And I believe not only will they potentially be willing to pay more for a product, but you as a leader will actually be much more sought after. Again, it's the nature of understanding, though, this new paradigm and understanding how it not only will make your company a better company, but the very nature of being involved with it will actually increase your profits, not decrease your profits. And actually, you will have not only a successful company in terms of how employees feel about working for the company, because employees want meaning and purpose, but also how the consumer views you. And there will also, I believe, have a huge direct impact on not only profitability, but ultimately shareholder value. That, in a nutshell, is the value proposition. And this isn't just talk. This is, in fact, reality.
And I think Jim and Maya did a pretty good job of talking about this already, but businesses really either thrive or die based on talent acquisition and talent retention. And Jim said it well. I think, the best talent is going to be motivated by a company that has a sustainability mission and also, provides opportunities for their employees to thrive and be challenged and to be happy in the workplace. Having a sustainable venture and one that is doing right by the planet, their people, and the community is one way to attract and keep that talent for sure.
I second both, and reminder to everybody that Gen Z is coming of age, and they won't work for companies that are not working on purposeful missions, on products that don't destroy but actually enhance. There's also a whole conversation of moving beyond, not only our carbon footprint but our carbon handprint. Like, what is the positive that we can actually create on the planet, and that is a transition also in mindset and also in what people want to do for work. You're actually seeing that there's a lot of lack of we're seeing it in hospitality and other businesses that weren't paying their employees well during before COVID, and of course during COVID, people are not coming back because they're like, why should I work for something that doesn't respect me? So there's a lot of that in the respecting your workers, respecting the planet, but also good bringing in good business models that actually work. And also the change in the conversation from GDP to well-being indexed, from just scaling and growing to continuously being thriving and healthy. There's a whole conversation of what does it mean to be even successful in the 21st century. I haven't even touched about that, but that's part of rethinking and having new mindsets of what does it actually mean to be a conscious entrepreneur during these times. So I'll leave you with that.
That's great. Well, Dan, Maya, Jim, thank you so much. This has been an illuminating conversation and very kind of mind-opening. I think, Jim, you mentioned the idea of like changing mental models or mindsets. Lots to learn, lots more to kind of understand in terms of the trends. But I think the net of it is these are at the forefront, probably closer than what we expect. It is happening now. And what's good for humanity and good for the planet is also seems to be good and great for business. So thank you for sharing your thoughts and your perspectives. And thank you all for joining. We will see you at the next live Q&A.